What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a truly amazing guest. This is a guy I met all the way back in 2019 when he and I overlapped at ExileCon. And since then, I've learned a ton about him. I actually appeared on a podcast that he co-created with Darth Microtransactions called Tavern Talk. And he is one of the world's foremost authorities and thought leaders in the ARPG space, specifically, I'm told, when it comes to minions. It's such a pleasure today to have on the show the Necromancer himself, Ghazzy. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. The Necromancer. I like that title. I should go by that name officially.
You should totally co-opt it. Honestly, it's a layup. I mean, and I have a couple of questions that I want to get started with. One, Ghazzy is your nickname, I found out. I thought it might have been actually related to your real name. You're originally born in Sweden, apparently. Is that true?
Yes. So I'm one of those nerds that I had a middle name that I changed to Ghazzy about 15 years ago. So I'm one of those nerds that really adopted the alias to my real life name. So my driver license and everything says Ghazzy as my middle name now.
It does. So you said is your middle name.
Yeah.
What was the actual origin of it?
Okay. So first I had an alias called Ghost, Ghozzt.
Okay.
But I was an avid PvPer in World of Warcraft back in the day, and the male undead rogue looked way better in the gear than the female one. I was trying to try the other way around, so I had to make a sex change, but I thought the Ghost felt too masculine, so I told my friend, and he's like, well, let's just find like a gender-neutral touch to your name, and he's like, let's change this to an A and that to a Y, and Ghazzy. Great. And then about a decade later, I find out that if you spell my name a little bit differently, it's kind of a common name in the Middle East, apparently. But here we are.
Interesting. You mentioned that you played World of Warcraft, and I'm very curious to know, because we need to know the origin story of this fascination with minions. I'm sure that you've discussed it before on Tavern Talk and certainly in your build guides and so on. And I've read some of your build guides over the years. They are second to none, honestly. Incredibly amazing work in the space. And I think you've inspired probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people over to the dark side. When did that begin? Like, was it something that started? Did you play a hunter with a pet, for example, in WoW?
No, funny enough, I was a rogue only player in World of Warcraft. Actually, I exclusively played rogue. So my appreciation of the dark arts comes from actually, you're gonna love this. It's Magic the Gathering.
Tell me.
So, I mean, Demure, the blue-black kind of approach, I'm absolutely in love with it. It's like the whole dark approach to those things kind of got in the background of everything I was doing in gaming. So when I started playing ARPGs like Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Diablo 1 didn't really have much of that. The sorcerers had their stuff. But when Diablo 2 came out, and I got to feel like the dark arts kind of play style and thematic of necromancy and the poison stuff that were running in Diablo 2. That was just on point with everything I played in games before that. It's like everything I did had to be like dark spells, undead, death spells, all of those things. And that was just directly connected to my Magic the Gathering upbringing, if you will, in gaming. And, one thing led to another. So every ARPG game I played, I just get stuck doing that. And most of the thematic approaches to that in ARPGs goes hand in hand with necromancy. So when I got tricked into playing Path of Exile about 12 and a half years ago.
I heard a little bit about this. Yeah, I want to hear the actual. What's the real story?
So I was playing Diablo 3, very disappointed about the minion playstyle, and the dark arts, that kind of thing felt kind of lackluster compared to the D2. It wasn't as dark and gritty as Diablo 2 memories served me.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine said, you should try Path of Exile. They have minions there. And he said, they're viable, they're good, and they feel like Diablo 2 Necromancer. So I was like, well, you got me. I'll try the game out. I tried it, and he was right. It felt like D2 Necromancer. And it was like, okay, this is what I wanted. So I started playing it more and more, and it wasn't until I got to the end game I realized that he lied on the first two parts. It was neither viable or good.
What year was that? Was this like 2014 maybe? Because I know you got
around 2014 patch, just before 1.1, so that's 12 and a half years ago, give or take. Atziri, Sacrifice of the Vault came out, and everyone said you can't beat Uber Atziri with minion builds. I was like, I mean, I'm already hooked. I might as well make them viable.
Accepted. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, basically. So it took me about a month of going back and forth, and I found a way to deal with it. One of the second boss, the trio fighters, so it's always a bit wonky. If you didn't do it right, then it was impossible to save the fight. So that happened a few times.
Can you give me a TLDR of exactly how that fight went? Because I'm curious to know, what was it about the Uber Atziri fight that made it so difficult to tackle with a summoner?
So, I mean, we had a lackluster of just generic damage output, and most builds had instant leeching capabilities. You don't have any leech with the minions. And then the next problem was, as soon as your minions died, your damage is gone. And back then we had snapshotting. So when you had, say, the way you summoned your zombies was you would equip Montego's Grasp, a scepter that upped the size and efficiency of your minions, but you could only have half of them. So you would summon half your minions. Then you would go to town where your minions aren't summoned, change gear piece, go back to where you summon the things to summon the rest of your summons. Yeah. And you had like full gear with minion damage modifiers to snapshot everything. That was just your zombies. Then you had a whole process to do the same thing with specters. Then back to your town, change your gear to do this next thing with the next minion. It was so messy. You used mine support with the sun splint or whatever the belt was. To trigger the mines that would summon the minion, because that would give them a multiplier. It took like 15 minutes to summon your minions.
Insane. And how quick could a wipe happen? Like how quickly?
I mean, that was just a half a second, a millisecond. Like you fucked up on one step on that trio fight. You lost half your minions. You're like, okay, give me 10, 15 minutes to resummon everything.
Oh my god! How long did you grind this for?
Well, I was going back and forth for about a month before I nailed everything down. But it's like the trio fight. If you had to kill the, which referred to as titty bitch, the whatever her face is, but that's her common name in the community. So you had to kill her, and then you had to kill the flame guy before he went into the form. And if you didn't do that, it was better to kill the whirlwind guy because he was bleeding, right? And it was just a mess. If you fucked up on any of those, killed the wrong one, it was over. You just had to restart. There was no chance of winning it. And if you didn't kill them fast enough, you would die so many times in there. This is before you even get to the hard fight. Yeah. So that's why most people said it wasn't possible. But it took a month. But eventually we got it down. And, that kind of kickstarted my entire career and my name in the community from there. And here we are 12 years later.
Yeah, I was reading that according to legend, it was something like 1,000 wipes. Is that accurate?
That's probably more.
Insane.
That's probably a lot more than that.
do you have a background of having that kind of grindy tenacity and other things related to gaming, or is that something that you just adopted for PoE because the challenge was so huge?
I have a problem. When I decide to play a game, I have to do everything I can to be the best at what I do. That's the way I enjoy playing the game. So in World of Warcraft, for example, I played rogues. We met a lot of other RMP teams. We met some, not sure if you remember, like Pyro mages. They would have like a button they could click and insta-cast their biggest fire spell that would crit for more than half your HP.
Yeah, I played the game from, I started raiding in 2008. I played it on when it came out and played through the beta and played a little bit in early release. And then there just wasn't, like there was raiding, but the raiding was horrible. The tools to play it and stuff just didn't exist. But I came back in 2008 and I played steadily for about 7 years on Rogue main the whole time. Yeah. Although I doubt that it seems like you would have played either subtlety or assassination rather than combat based on
for PvP we went subtlety. Yeah. It's like back then I realized that there are ways for me to improve. So I would sit for hours upon hours with a couple of mage friends, literally just them trying to land a pyro on me. And my job was to vanish it. And I'd practiced that so many times over. It's completely irrelevant. I might have had used to it to maybe 2 or 3 arena games over the course of like a year. But like I did that because I think it's fun. And before I started streaming, I played 4th, 5th position support and semi-support for a team called GPG in Dota 2. So it's the same thing there. Just practice. I don't know. I kind of like the aspect of it because personal improvements. When you get the what's the word? When you get to reap the benefits of all that hard labor of practicing, it feels really good. That's one of the aspects.
I'm at the risk of delving too deep into kind of the magic history. I'm wondering if this showed up when you played Magic as well. You said that you played Demure, but there's a lot of different ways to play that. Like the way that I always played Demure was that I played blue control with black discard and black disruption and backed up by white and so on. I didn't play a core Demure strategy like milling, for example, or reanimation. So did you play one of those core? You got to have played reanimation decks, right?
Reanimation, and I did a lot of control. I did like the control aspect a lot. The only time I deviated hard from my personal preferences was back in Theros. That was my last tourney deck I played, and that was the Devotion to Black Packrat, just full sug aggro. And that was hilarious. So I kind of missed not having done that before, because that was really fun.
Yeah, unbelievably broken. It requires a broken tool, though, in order to really facilitate that. Speaking of broken tools, I was going to ask you, I don't know if you've followed any of Magic's design over the last couple of years, but the power creep in the game is so unbelievably off the charts insane. Yeah. There's a creature that they made and spoiled a couple of years ago that when I saw it, I honestly did not believe that it was real. I said, there's no way they would actually print this creature. This has to be either a typo or an unglued card or a fan card or something. Have you heard of the creature called Psychic Frog?
No, I haven't stayed up to date in years.
It's honestly just total. Well, it's a play on words from the creature Psych Atog, which you probably did hear about back in the day.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, Psychotog, Psychotog was the backbone of a whole control archetype. It was the kind of card that I would have played with, and it worked particularly well with Madness. Psychic Frog is a 1/2 creature for 2 mana, 1 blue and 1 black. It has the Ophidian ability, so whenever you hit your opponent with it and deal combat damage, you draw a card. You can also exile cards from your graveyard. I think it's 3 cards maybe, to give it flying until end of turn. And you can also discard a card from your hand to give it a +1/+1 counter. So you can play it on turn 2 and you're like, do you block with
black
my
and blue
1/2
mana
that's attacking? Zero mana, by the way, to give it +1/+1. You just discard a card. You're like, oh, you blocked with your Ernom Djinn? Well, I guess I discard 4 cards and kill your Ernom. And now I have a 5/6 creature with potentially flying that's also an Ophidian. For 2 mana in blue-black, it also allows you to discard into the graveyard indeterminately, right? You're like, oh, I can just put this creature in the graveyard and reanimate it for 1 black mana. It doesn't matter how big it is. So insane. It got banned in tons of formats. And it's
I don't blame them.
the consummate Demure card. I'm sure that if you had started playing Magic 2 or 3 years ago, you would have immediately gravitated to the Psychic Frog, and every deck would have just been a Psychic Frog deck as long as it was legal.
It sounds like that's exactly what I would have done, yeah.
I have a question that I actually posed to Darth. It kind of came up spontaneously, and it came up at the end of the conversation, so he didn't really have any time to churn on it. I presented myself with the same question to you to keep it fair, but I want you to think about this. I'd like you to think of your top favorite 5 games of all time. And you don't have to answer that right now, but just kind of put it on the back burner in the back of your mind, because I'm curious to know it. People's games say so much about them as a person. It's so revealing about how they problem solve, how they find dopamine and challenge. And it'll be really interesting to hear how your favorite games of all time sort of relate to the mania with summoning and necromancers and stuff.
I could probably give you the list right away.
All right, rattle them off. Give me at least. Let's start with the 5th one.
It would take me a while to go through the ranking order.
Okay, top 5. Give me top 5 then.
Top 5 would be, Diablo 2 is up there for sure. That's most my entire ARPG childhood growing up. Like, that's just D2 for obvious reasons. Magic the Gathering, absolutely one of the games up there. World of Warcraft as well. I spent multiple thousands of hours in it. And Path of Exile 1 kind of defined. Most of my adult life has been defined by Path of Exile. It's like I owe a lot to you and the other guys, to the founders. Like, you defined me as a person, and my entire career is like PoE for sure. And then that's 4 games, and then I have Dota 2. Well, not Amazing. Dota 2, but Dota in general, since I played so much of that as well competitively. So those are my top 5.
Did you play Dota when it was just Dota, or did you only play the Dota 2? So you played it back when it was just Warcraft 3 mod, all the way back to the beginning. Yeah, what a crazy thing that was. And just to talk about that later on, about how a game engine gets created and then a mod gets created within that game engine. And that mod turns out to be the better version of the game, it turns out.
Warcraft 3 Reforged. We called it. I was going to play it together with another streamer, Pox. He's a huge Warcraft 3 fanatic. He's to this day he plays it every day. So we talked about it before Reforged came out, and we're like, yeah, that's super hyped up. Both bought it, and then 2 days later, the entire industry calls it Warcraft 3 refunded. Nobody liked it. It was so crazy. Like they had this part. There was a part in their contracts when you posted like maps. Like player created maps to avoid another Dota from happening. So they had this extra addition to the contract. I don't know exact details. So like you take it with a grain of salt, but something in the line said that they had a partial or full ownership of the games that were posted. So nobody wanted to transition their Warcraft 3 original custom maps into Reforged because they would lose their licenses and stuff like that for whatever reason it was. It was absolutely
what a ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of fell off from there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you think about what sort of sustained the Warcraft 3 engine for years was this mod that was built. I remember actually that transition that happened, logging into Warcraft 3 to play, and every single game said Dota on it. I'm like, what the hell is Dota? I just scroll down, it's just Dota, Dota, Dota. And Blizzard obviously dropped the ball because they didn't make their own version of it. They left it up to Valve and Riot to do that.
Icefrog went to Heroes of New Earth, which most of us played. Yeah, and then Valve stole Icefrog essentially, and that kind of killed the momentum Hon had, and Dota 2 just kind of took over. And of course, League of Legends came out, and that kind of skyrocketed a lot in terms of being more, let's call it new player approachable. Similar to like PoE 2 is more new player onboarding friendly than the PoE 1. Kind of what League did, and there was that League, Dota, but mostly League actually in combination with StarCraft esports scene, kind of made the whole streaming industry really pop off as well. Like Justin TV, later Twitch, all of that is credited to a lot of attention to specifically StarCraft as well with the esports, but League was also playing a big role in this, and Dota as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the time frame that happened in. I didn't know that you had such a huge, extensive background in the whole MOBA space, but it's unsurprising to me given how much you can kind of min-max that whole, how much you can min-max the strategy also. When you played tons, did you have a set team that you played with, or did you just play with pickup groups?
No, I played ranked, list the ELO system solo, but I played for a team called GPG. They were funded by SK Gaming, I think it was. They funded it. It was like a small team. Played in a series called the A series. We're in the top 10 teams there. So it's like you get the pro scene, and then underneath the pro scene, you had a handful of amateur leagues. And a lot of the attention that the pro teams were collecting people from were from top teams in these minor series underneath the pro scene, as well as high-ranked people in the ELO system of the actual official game. So that's kind of like where the attention went.
Is any of that stuff still around anymore?
Not really. They're more official tournaments and stuff like that these days. Like I thought I was, top of the world. I was paid €1,000 a month to play for that team. After taxes here in Sweden, that doesn't pay the bills.
It does not pay the bills. Yeah, I was actually very curious to know how much you made as sort of a feeder league, kind of, rather than being one of the actual pro teams. I read so much about that stuff. It seemed like it reached a real mania in the years right before the pandemic, like 2017, 18 and stuff. I remember reading about the Valve tournament that had $10 million in prize money that was contested at the giant stadium and so on. And just seeing esports get to that pinnacle was totally mind-boggling to me. I imagine you had a similar experience.
There's around that time frame, I was invited to have a speech about streaming at a school, and it was the class I was in front of was an esports class.
Wow.
Which is like, what? That was the craziest experience I had. Like, there's an esports class, and then I started reading up on it, and apparently Sweden is quote unquote behind on this, because if you go like over the pond from it over to Denmark, then apparently it's super big. They have massive school tournaments in esports in a variety of different games there, and there's classes for esports, and I'm like, That's like the equivalence of, us being music students when we were young, which I was. Like, you went there because you were lazy, kind of thing, and spent your time playing games on the breaks instead.
No, there's no way that you could ever call a pro MOBA player lazy. It's like,
no, that's fair. That's fair.
When you look at any population, soccer is probably the best example because it's such an egalitarian thing. It's basically, there's no barrier to entry. All that's required is one other person to play with, sometimes not even that, a wall, a field, and a ball. So it's the most accessible thing, which means that if you plot all the people who play that activity on a gigantic chart, the people at the very top end of that chart are 8, 9 standard deviations outliers, 1 in a billion humans, because the sample size is so big. And in esports, there was so much money involved in it. I guess starting in South Korea, going all the way back to turn of the century, essentially, where people were becoming mega superstars in South Korea. And then players in Europe, as best I understand it, were training in order to go compete against the guys in South Korea. They would actually move there to compete in the esports leagues that were growing. And so the population just kept getting more and more and more massive. And with I don't know how many people have played League of Legends and Dota 2 between them, but it's got to be hundreds of millions of people have played those games at this point. So the skill level is the neurology and stuff is so galactic. It's so off the charts. And in order to compete at that level, what kind of time do you have to put in? It's kind of like I follow professional competitive distance running. And a long time ago, it was possible to be a competitive world-class distance runner only putting in 70, 80 miles a week, only running an average of 10 miles a week. The guys that are winning now are doing double that. They're running 150 miles a week because that's what's required. That's what's required to actually be competitive at the elite level. So I imagine that in the MOBA space, it's the same way. You've got people that are working 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week just to be at the top of it. It's the opposite of lazy, like there's no room for that at all.
But it's also partially that, the biggest reason is that, but the other reason, we don't see many older players. And when I say older in that scene, I'm talking 25
like
24,
plus. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, 20, 25 or higher. You don't see many of those coming in because at that age, you got to work, you have your expenses to pay, you're renting your apartment. You're not able to put those hours in unless you're still staying at home, living in mom's basement. But that's why you see, partially that. The other reason, obviously, reaction time goes down as we get older.
Totally.
So that definitely has a thing. But mobile is a little bit more excusable on that end because a lot of it can go down to muscle memory. But like when you go to shooter games, you don't see older people maintain. They fall off eventually as a result of that, or they have a harder time keeping up with the kids. So I remember I don't remember the name of the guy. I saw some post about some 17-year-old kid just demolishing the pro scene in Counter-Strike. And the organization Faceit flew this guy out to their headquarters, whatever it was, and had him play on one of their computers, and he still just wiped the floor on everyone. And I don't know, No Scream, I think it was. I might be wrong in the name. Maybe someone watching can leave a comment down below who I'm talking about. But to me, that was just crazy. Like the 17-year-old kid is just, to me, just confirms this whole scenario where it's like you don't have the time to get to that level unless you're young and you're staying at home and you can go to school, come home, play games from like afternoon till late night and do the same thing. Yeah. So as soon as you get older, you don't have the time to do that. The opportunity's gone. It's over.
Yeah, it's the opportunity combined with the very broad net and the fact that there's such a huge financial incentive to actually excel at these games now that you can actually become successful, wealthy, famous through playing a game. So the selective pressure extends to people. For example, if you were to think about somebody that obviously has this 17-year-old's basic neurology, he's not a normal human being in any sense. But 100 years ago, what would he have wound up doing? Where would he have been able to use those capabilities? There would not have been a thing like a game, not even 20 years ago or 30 years ago, where he could devote the time and actually turn it into a career. And so it's one of the coolest things about, how modern games have this financial support, although it seems like it's intermittent, that we go through periods of time where a lot more money gets pumped into competitive gaming and then it kind of goes through lulls.
I mean, that just comes down to the money follows the audience, right? The wider the net, the more money will be there because there's more eyes on it. It's just marketing 101, right? I mean, there's a reason why male football has such an obnoxious amount of money in it, because everybody watches it. And then when people complain about female athletes in soccer, for example, they don't make as much. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, they're fantastic players. It's just that there's not enough people watching them to have them be paid the same amount as the male ones, because there's just so many eyes on it. And gaming has seen the same transition as well. Like in the early days, there was no money in it. People did it because because of their passion.
Yeah,
and then
I'm very familiar.
Yeah, and as more eyes got into it, content creation, YouTube helped a lot. Streaming platforms like Justin, Own 3D back in the day, over to Twitch and whatnot, Kick, Rumble, whatever, and YouTube streaming for that matter as well. Like there's so much eyes on it that now there's the marketing money comes in as a result of it, and now there's funding to it, and just the general consensus. Like back in the day, many, many years ago, when you were a gamer, you were a nerd and outcast and shunned in the community. Now, being a gamer is normal. Like the vast majority of people and kids, they're gamers. And it's not something that is frowned upon.
And celebrities,
and
too.
Celebrities,
countless celebrities. At the risk of meandering too far away from our core Path of Exile, Diablo-related conversation, I hosted this Magic event at the Bitcoin conference a couple of weeks ago in Vegas. And all of the invited celebrities were NFL players and actors and stuff. Yeah. And they love Magic. It's a huge part of their lives, even though historically, I'm sure when you were doing most of your Demure playing, it was still regarded as being a nerd thing.
Oh, yeah.
With a ton of associated social stigmas. Speaking of PoE and Diablo, I want to circle back to that a little bit. And as far as your kind of penchant to play minion builds, you mentioned that you got tricked into playing Path of Exile because Diablo 3's minion support was meager, was inadequate, insufficient relative to the gameplay experience that you wanted. And I'm trying to remember, because I played Diablo 3 when it came out, and my recollection was that the only summoner class was the Witch Doctor.
Yes, sir. And
the Witch Doctor summoning amounted to a pool on the ground or a couple of little guys that ran around with you, but it really wasn't. It wasn't even half baked. It was quarter baked.
Yeah, when that's being generous.
Yeah. What was your impression of Path of Exile when you first came over? I mean, obviously you had a great time, and then eventually you found out that, in fact, minions were not as strong as you thought in the end game. But I'm very curious to know, the year that you started playing PoE, 2014, the game has been out for under a year since it came out in October of 2013. And at that point, it was filled with all sorts of things that the best way to describe them were relics, atavisms in a way, things that were holdovers from decisions that we as a company had to make, concessions that we had to make as a developer in order to actually make the game playable, to make it fun, to make it accessible, to not make it to make it free also. When you make a game free, there's a hard cap on how much you can really give to the player out of the gate. And one of the things we did not give the player was an aesthetically pleasing experience at the start. On top of that, the game was filled with desync issues. And I wonder if your predilection to minion play was kind of a compensation in a way, an adaptation to that fact. Because as you know, you can DC for 30 seconds. And guess what? Your minions are still running around on the server. They're still beating up all the enemies while you're frozen on the screen. Your enemies protect you. Was that a part of your decision to actually really go hardcore on minion play?
No, not really. I mean, we were spamming /OOS macros. So
what does that mean? Explain that.
So OS is out of sync. So if you type /OOS, it would resync you, but it was an internal cooldown on it. So we would spam a macro every 5 seconds or something.
Did you just press a button that did it 5 times? You just walk around doing that?
I mean, it's been 12 years. I can probably say it now. So originally, I just unlocked my scroll wheel on my mouse, and I just let that rip.
So you just be dragging your finger on it. God, how annoying,
you can just spin it once. It looks like this, and it just keeps spinning.
I see.
So it just spinning.
As long as you don't touch it, you can still. That's amazing. How long would one spin last for?
I mean, a couple of seconds. I mean, 20 seconds, maybe at best, 15. But what I did,
just like zing, zing, zing as you go.
I did that, and then I got an AHK, like the auto hotkey, and I just wrote up a quick script to press that once every 7 seconds or something. But that's later. Like, one of the reasons for me was like what I wanted from the ARPG was the same feeling I had with D2, because that was like such an incredible experience for me.
Yeah, explain that to me. What was that feeling?
I mean, like, for me, it was just a dark, nitty gritty environment. Like, everything was just dark and gloomy, and it felt. I mean, dark is like the best way to describe it. I mean, like the definition of dark kind of feeling to it.
Yeah, grim dark is how it was often described.
And D3 was like, hey, let's add some ponies in there. But that came later. But I mean, it felt very cartoony. So like for me, the Diablo 2 feeling of it being like grim dark, like you said, it feels like that feeling never came to me with Diablo 3. Never. Yeah. It never felt. Graphics in D2. I mean, you were part of that growing up when games went from even worse graphics than me. You're a couple of years older than me. And then we got to the point where
actually
it's only a few years. It's only a couple of years.
16 years, I think.
Okay, a handful then. Well, you know, I grew up with that. My brother played like Final Fantasy. I got into Final Fantasy. I played 1 through 10 plus X2. And I remember playing Final Fantasy 7, and the graphics were like mind blowing. Oh my God, this is so crazy. Yeah. And we played Final Fantasy 8, the cutscenes, like, oh, this was recorded with a camera. They're actors. So like that was the feeling, right? Yeah. So when I played D2, like for me, like Necromancer, like the graphics that wasn't like bad or anything. I liked the way that was feeling. D3 had better graphics, but it was very cartoony. So when I went over to Path of Exile, the graphics kind of reminded me of D2. It's like, to me, that never was an issue. It really wasn't like the aesthetic pleasing aspect of it never really mattered to me, what the gameplay did. And the gameplay reminded me way more of Diablo 2, which is what I was looking for in the ARPG part of the industry. And I got all of that. I got to control a mass amount of minions. The cap on raiding spirit, it was not 20, it was 50 back then. I mean, it's like, I don't know how you guys had no idea. That was crazy.
I remember when that spell got released. It was actually... To me, it was one of those things where we were really starting to improve the graphical fidelity of the game. It felt like a really modern skill, you know, the little flaming skulls that ran around and stuff. And the fact that you could get so many of them on the screen and they're all animated and doing things individually and so on. Yeah. It really felt like an incredibly cool next level skill. When you play the Necromancer, did you ever get a chance? And when I say Necromancer, I'm talking about the Diablo 2 one. Did you ever get a chance to... Did you play the crazy broken corpse explosion version of that? Or did you always just play a summoner? You never got to play that version?
So I grew up outside of town. We didn't get the fiber for like a broadband. We didn't get that till much, much later. So originally I played games on dial-up. And like I still remember the sound. It's so nostalgic. So I played Tibia, another MMORPG game that's based off like Ultima and Ultima Online series. Yeah. So I played that. People play that, or they play RuneScape that came about like 6 months after Tibia. So both are inspired from the same kind of approach. So I played that on dial-up. So when I played Diablo 2, I wanted to try to be the best at it. So I played on hardcore. There's no way I play hardcore in dial-up. Mom picks up the phone. Okay, that goes all the time wasted, you know? So no, I didn't do that. Then we got ADS, all the copper cables and whatnot, but because of that, I never played online in Diablo 2, so I never got exposed to see that, you know, what people did as meta. So for me, Diablo 2 was like, I played like a casual gamer in Diablo 2. I heard about things that was talked about, you know, amongst friends and whatnot, but that was my experience growing up with D2, was never the online scene. So I never got exposed to the FOMO of playing the best of the plus. I did my thing. I played minions. I struggled through the maggot lair, having one minion in the front. Like I did that, and I never wanted to go back again, but like that, I enjoyed it. Right.
I can't believe, just speaking of that, I can't believe that was actual acceptable gameplay.
I did.
Single little tunnel, and you're like, cast Bone Spear, I guess. Bone Spear for like 5 minutes. And I guess eventually everything is dead, you know, like the sound changes.
Oh, it gets worse. I was very picky about when I played it. I was very young. I wanted to play my minions. I ain't touching the other skills. So I would go in there and I would sit there and I would wait for that one minion to finish killing it. eventually I stopped going in with full minions, skelly warriors, and I had like one or two instead as body blockers. Then we just had more mages instead and cleared it up a little faster. But like that's my first experience of Maggot Lair. It's the worst place in the entire game. But that's my experience. Was very casual and never exposed to the FOMOs. Like a lot of the things and information and metas and how people farm this and that. For me, it was like just conversations with friends, and some of those played online, but like I just played offline. So I was never part of the higher end ceiling pro competitive great gamers of D2. For me, it was just I'm playing this for fun, and that was it. I
mean, honestly, I get that, because there were people that took Diablo 2 seriously, but I don't think that the game was ready to be taken seriously in that way. It's just, if you think about what most people did in Diablo 2 when it became a lifestyle game, it was just PvP in the Bloodmoor. And PvP in the Bloodmoor is kind of ridiculous when you're a summoner. It doesn't even make any sense. Like how exactly does that work? Hang on, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to go farm a bunch of specters and stuff and skeletons. And hang on, just don't leave, please.
Yeah, I'll be there in a minute. But I mean, PvP in Diablo 2 is like, my experience with that is you either get one shot or you one shot someone, or you desync Hammerdins, or you have two whirlwind barbs fighting each other for 2 hours, and whoever quits first loses.
Exactly. They both whirl through each other, and you see their health go down and then back up again, down and back up again.
Yeah, and people praised it. You know, Diablo 4 introduced PvP zones, and I'm like, why are you guys praising this? Everyone's like, D2 PvP was so good. Do you guys not remember what D2 PvP was?
It turns out, actually, that if you have a game that has really, really good end game, great aspirational PvE content, that people don't actually play PvP at all. The reason why they play PvP in Diablo 2 is because there's literally nothing to do other than just farming Mephisto or something. And we learned this lesson. I'm sure you were actually playing the game back then. We made a PvP expansion essentially for Path of Exile. And I remember in the days and weeks and months leading up to that release, we were just talking about this is going to be a huge step forward for the game, because PvP was the lifeblood of Diablo 2. It was the reason why people played it for 6, 7, 8 years. And we released this expansion. Look at all the PvP stuff. Nobody touched it. It was like 2% of the population played the PvP stuff. And as far as I know, it was never really revisited again. Because
there was this Hall of the Grandmaster was a really cool concept. But outside of that, they like all of the PvP stuff was really cool and fun, but it was only a very small fraction of player base. But there was a streamer called Green Man Dude. Was it Willy Wonka or something? I don't remember the other guys, but they hosted like PvP tournaments. There were duel tournaments. It was really cool, but it was still only a fraction of the player base that gave a shit about it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's just the way it is.
Not nearly enough to justify the work involved in actually trying to make it a thing. And it's so different from a game like World of Warcraft, which has an entire PvP community in it, while also having a giant PvE community. And I just think that it's because in World of Warcraft, by the team nature of the fighting and the fact that characters are so diverse and the way that the damage is different also, and you can get all this dedicated PvP gear, they built enough systems there to make it appealing, measured against a PvE experience. But it's never really, the interest was so low in the PvE space or the PvP space initially that you couldn't justify spending months and months of studio time making more PvP content for a tiny little fraction of the community, since you didn't need to build up that community anyway. And the PvE stuff was more than enough to keep people coming back.
It also makes sense, right? Because like ARPGs was never really good at the PvP gameplay because of the nature of how your characters were designed. You're supposed to mow down hordes of monsters.
Yeah. How does that work in a 1v1? It's either one shots or there's weird artificial constraints on how the characters work. And speaking of how characters work, I was actually curious to get your feedback about this, because anybody who's played summoners across time, there's a lot of different kind of summoner experiences you can have. There's the build a giant army of minions, and it's kind of fire and forget, where you're basically monitoring, just replacing the dead bodies. And then there's some much more active versions of, I guess, the zookeeper idea, where you're adding buffs and stuff continuously to the minions. I remember actually one of the last flavor design things that I did on PoE, I think probably you would definitely know better than me, was when a number of different necromancer or summoner skills were added. That one of them I think was called Bone Offering, for example, was added as a skill. And it was this idea that we want you to feel more interactive with the minions so that you create a region where all of your minions flock to and they have stronger abilities as long as they're within a circle. Do you prefer that kind of style of play, or do you like the just kind of casual monitor the army, but kind of hands off, hands free?
So this is quite interesting conversation or topic to cover, because one of the main reasons I stuck with the minion gameplay more so than the thematic approach of dark art spells and whatnot was actually because of PoE's gameplay for minions. If you look at the early stage of leveling a character from the start for level 1 and you get to the early mapping stage, minion gameplay in PoE is the most active gameplay character that you can play of everything in PoE. Most of the builds, they have everyone has a mobility skill, maybe a curse. That's 2 buttons. And then most builds have 1 main ability. So that's 3 buttons. Some builds might have a utility skill on top of that. That's 4 buttons. So the minions have that. Then you have corpse generation. That's 5. Then you have something to consume the corpse generation for your offerings. That's 6. Then you have convocation. Now you're 7. And then you have resurrecting dead minions. So that might be a zombie, a golem, and maybe 1 more in some cases, but let's say 2. Now you have 8 skills to work. You don't even have room on your action bar for all of this. Amazing. And so now you have to use a second action bar to work with it. And then the gameplay itself is not just you running into a pack of enemies and holding down right click. You now have to think about your positioning, your HP, the enemy's HP and their positioning, what they're doing, and also all your minions, what they're doing and their HP. So there's so much more layers of gameplay that to me makes, I guess, the skill cap goes up. I mean, that has less to do with it, but it's more interesting gameplay for me to engage with. And in PoE, the goal with your character is to become a god in the end.
Right.
What's really cool with minions is as you progress, you are essentially automating a lot of these things you have to do. So at some point, your minions is just not going to die if you geared enough. Well, that removes 2 of your buttons. Or well, you can automate your offering and your corpse generation. Well, that's 2 more buttons gone. Oh, now I'm mirror tiered gear. I have the best character gear that you can get in the league, and all I'm doing is just shield charging and convocating. So now I'm a 2-button gameplay. But I feel like me getting to that point feels every incremental step that automates these processes feels rewarding, and it feels good to have gone through the process of I have now upgraded my character to make it even better to play and also better performance. So that just makes the gameplay in general just vastly superior for me to enjoy personally compared to other builds where it's just I played Madifine KB Wonder builds. I hold down right click through an entire map. I do that for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. My hand hurts. I had to put the keypad on my keyboard. So every other map I would hold down the button on my keyboard instead of my mouse. It just did not hurt my wrists. You don't get that with minions.
Are there any third-party mods or anything that you use for this peak summoner experience? Is there anything that's accepted in the community? Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I know that they're an integral part of WoW, for example. In fact,
like add-ons and stuff. Yeah. No, we don't have access to that in PoE, but when we have third-party tools like price checking and stuff like that. But for the actual gameplay, no, nothing.
I wanted to ask you about Tavern Talk, actually. Something that I was very curious about. I got invited on that show. I had heard about it and I'd seen little excerpts and so on. And apparently you and Darth kind of put that together back in 2023 as what was kind of the catalyst to get that going on?
So I had a podcast for a couple of years before that I had as a chill thing where I just call up a friend and have a conversation. No strings attached, because every podcast in the entire ARPG scene was one or whatever, the host or hosts would invite someone and it would be like, here's the document, here's the topic, here's the questions we're going to go through, this is what we're going to cover. Oh, we're done with that, let's move to the next one. We're done with that, let's move to the next one. And I was like, I'm so tired of it. What happened to just having a conversation with friends? So I said, okay, I'm just going to call up a buddy of mine. I think the first one I had, I think it was Criparian. I mean, you know Criparian. I think the first one I had with Crip, I think, I might be wrong. So many years ago. So I just called him up. I was like, here's the thing. We're just going to have a conversation. And then, when we're tired of talking to each other, we wrap it up and end it. And we ended up having like a 2 or 3 hour conversation. And we basically talked about one specific skill in PoE for almost 2 hours, almost exclusively for one ability. And I was like, great, that's a good show. Let's wrap it up. And then, people that wanted to listen in can do so if they want to. I don't care. I just want to talk to friends about a game that I have a burning passion for. Right. So, that transpired later. And I sent DM a message. I was watching his content. And before Aspengold made some reaction to his stuff in Diablo 4. And as I was already consuming his content, I sent a message to him on Twitter, it's like congratulating him on the success he got and the attention he got from that. And then when he came to PoE, like said us a couple months later, it's like, you know what, shit, welcome in. If you need any help, let me know. And one thing led to another. It's like I pitched the idea of having him on to that podcast I was running, but I wanted to do it with him and kind of escalated from there. And that's that went really well from the start.
Yeah, the rest is history. I've described it to other people because when I went on your show last year, a couple of people had questions about it, and I've described it as being, is it the most popular ARPG related podcast around?
I don't know. I don't think there's that many. Like back in the day, we had established podcasts that was regularly happening all the time in the scene. State of Exile, Tenacity, Pox, Siggy, and later that transpired. We had what was it? The Watch, Line Eyes Watch, or whatever it was, and then there was some other Bay class with Tarky, for example. Like those things were existing, but they kind of like most of these, well, all of them has kind of like just disappeared. And now we have like a couple of us content creators have our different things. Talking to Try has like the Still Sane podcast, Miso and the guys has another one, Dead Rabbit, and me and Darth have the Tavern Talk. Sis has his thing with a Stall-a-thon he does like with the other guys as well every now and then. But there's nothing that's happening as consistent as before. So I'm not sure about the most popular one, but
yeah, I'm wondering about. Have you noticed a kind of a split, a divide happening between the PoE 1 and PoE 2 communities in terms of that is one unfortunate disadvantage of creating a really successful sequel to a game is that you cannibalize a lot of your own players from the first game, and sometimes there might be a critical mass of people that are necessary to even justify creating a podcast or an internet show in the first place. And if now half those people have gravitated and moved on to Path of Exile 2 and now are paying attention to that game, and they no longer care about PoE 1, you might just wind up not having a big enough audience to support the idea in the first place. Have you seen that happening? I know that PoE 2 brought a lot more people into the space, but do you think that the amount of people that are still paying attention to PoE 1 is large enough still, or has a lot of that community kind of moved on to PoE 2?
I remember when a league launch had a lot of people and it was crazy cool. In those numbers, today we see when a league is kind of what we call dying. It's the same numbers we had on a peak back in the day, a decade ago.
Amazing. What kind of numbers? What kind of numbers are those?
I mean, let's say 40, 50,000 people is crazy high.
Yeah.
But now we have 250,000 people. It's like 200,000 people playing on, like PoE 1 is growing. Well, okay, it's not growing as much. It's kind of holding pretty steadily right now with the last couple of launches. But they've managed to keep growing consistently, which is insane. And then PoE 2 obviously has a tremendous more amount of people playing. And I think that's mostly because of the new player onboarding. And, it's the new shiny toy. It's modernized. So a lot more people are interested in it. And as long as they play Diablo, they've bought themselves into playing an ARPG game. And then the more they play Diablo, the higher the chances are that they get exposed to the comment, PoE is just better. And then they have no reason not to try PoE because it's free to play.
Yeah.
Obviously, the PoE 2 is a buy to enter for early access, at least till this year is over.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Sorry,
didn't mean to interrupt. Did you want to complete the...
No, you go for it.
You mentioned the idea earlier about player onboarding, and it's really interesting to think about how my perspective, and this is very much true for you also in a way, is that Diablo 3 was your onboarding to Path of Exile. And I wonder about Diablo 4 kind of fulfilling that role as well, that Diablo 4 is by any metric been an extremely successful game. It's sold millions of copies, tons and tons of people loving it and enjoying it and playing it all the time. But in a big population, a big bell curve of people who engage with a product in one way or another, out on the end, you've got these people that kind of want more. They want to have a deeper experience than Diablo 4 can give them. And so PoE 2 is sitting there, or possibly even PoE 1, as an opportunity for those people at the end of the bell curve to want to kind of step over and try this game that is obviously more complicated. I'm actually very curious to know in what ways are summoners and minions changed across the two games? I'm sure you could give a TED talk or write multiple graduate theses about this subject. Given that you're the world's foremost expert on this kind of thing, how is minion and summoner play different? Do you think it's better in PoE 2? And that's putting you out on the spot a little bit, but does it feel better as a person who has played and enjoyed lifelong summoner builds all the way back to the Diablo 2 days? Obviously, it didn't really exist in 1. Do you enjoy the summoner play more in 2, or do you still enjoy it more in 1, and why?
Like we're talking PoE.
Yeah, we're talking about Path of Exile.
I was thinking about Diablo there for a while.
I don't know enough. I don't know enough about Diablo 4 to even to question either way. I just know that it's simpler.
So, you remember the day you and I went to that sushi place in New Zealand?
Very well, yes.
Yes. So the day before, I had a conversation. I don't want to throw names under the bus, but I spoke to a couple of devs at the event, and they were talking about how all builds were supposed to be more active gameplay in PoE 2. And I kept asking them, how on earth they're going to make minion gameplay more active in PoE 2? Because it's the most active gameplay in PoE 1. Like, how are you going to achieve that? Yeah. Like, there's no more buttons. I mean, am I going to have like an MMO DPS rotation to be able to pull it off? Like, what are you talking about? And, there's things were still being changed before the game came out, right? This was before all the play tests we had in LA 2024. So obviously things weren't set. So I was kind of curious about this. And now that we're playing PoE 2, I'll just say this. I think that minion gameplay is far more active in PoE 1 till you start automating the skills. And after that, it's vastly different. PoE 2 has, for the most part, considerably less active gameplay than PoE 1. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think minion gameplay in PoE 2 has a lot of work to do when it comes to AI and whatnot. I've been very vocal about this with convocation systems that is currently done with a weapon swap, which is kind of annoying.
You've used that term a number of times. I'm actually curious. Can you explain it to me?
The convocation?
Yeah.
So there's a skill gem in PoE 1 that's called Convocate. So what it does, it teleports all your minions on top of you, essentially, with a small cooldown. So the gameplay in PoE 1 in the higher end game is basically you just run into a pack of enemies and then you use the convocation skill. And so all your minions it's like telebombing in Diablo 2, right? So you're just telebombing, but instead of having that, in teleporting instead of running, you have to do actual running, and every now you have a cooldown on the teleport.
Enigma, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
The culprit there.
Just telestomping everything in Diablo 2, but in PoE 1, we adopt the same approach to gameplay. But it has a cooldown. So you have to run into the enemies, then use the skill, which has a cooldown. So you can't do it all the time. And then what you do to the next pack of enemies is if you outrange your minions and run away from them, they leash back to you. So they can do it. So that's like the gameplay PoE 1. PoE 2 is obviously a bit slower, not too much slower in the early stage, but it's a bit slower than PoE 1 for sure. And we don't have that capability, but they allowed us to do weapon swapping because they have two different skill trees. You can have one skill tree for one weapon set, another skill tree for the other weapon set. So you can lock your weapon set. But what you can do is you can have your minions summoned on one weapon set, and then they're not summoned on the other weapon set. So now you run into a pack of enemies, you weapon swap twice. So you kill your minions, and then you bring them back up, and they will spawn on top of you. So that is something that most of us do not like at all, because the playstyle is very much, I run in. Now I just have to pretend I'm weapon swapping, because you're locking both your weapons, your item sets. So you're not actually swapping your weapons. You're just telling the game that now I'm going to use weapon set number 2, where your minions are not summoned, and then go back to where they are summoned to teleport them to you. So I do hope that they attend to this in the patch notes that's coming out on the 21st.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting exploit. I mean, does it degrade the gameplay? Does it feel mandatory?
Oh, it's definitely mandatory.
Yeah.
If you want to play effectively, it's mandatory. And some builds are quite honestly borderline impossible or frustrating to play without it. So that's one of it. There's a couple of mini builds that I prefer to play that don't have this as a necessity to play. And that's more like speedy minions. But that also limits build choices or build diversity when it comes to which minions you run with. Because their speed and aggression, their aggro range and all those things, and time for them to get to on target becomes crucial factors to avoid having to weapon swap all the time. Like range minions and stuff like that, you have to. And
makes sense.
I mean, they're still working on it, so hopefully we'll see some changes to this, but I hope that they will be in this patch notes.
You have a long history of writing some of the best guides and generally the authoritative guides on the entire class of summoner style builds in PoE 1, and I imagine extending all the way into Path of Exile 2. How did you get started in that? What was the first guide that you put together where you just said, you know what? I understand this class better than anyone, and it's time to communicate that message to the public. I imagine it didn't probably begin as something that you thought, hey, I'll turn this into a career. This is just something that I feel like an authority on. So what was the first guide that you wrote?
So I started streaming a little bit of D3 just a week or two before I went into PoE. And it was just a fun thing for me just to hang out with some friends and just, because I was still playing anyway. So that was kind of like the reason. But when I killed Atziri on the Summoner build, I had so many people wanting me to explain the build and everything. So I started explaining to them. And another guy goes into my inbox. I explain the build to them. And I'll just make a thread and I'll just paint it up. So I did that. And we did the guides on the PoE forums, right? And then I had hundreds upon hundreds of pages of comments. And I went through them on a daily basis and responded to each and every one in those comments. And just to help them out. And then I realized, why am I doing this? And eventually I was like, if you have questions, just come to the stream and I'll just stream more and I'll just answer it verbally because it's way faster than doing it, typing to everyone.
Yeah.
And then I made some other stuff like when SS Strain and Contagion Skills came out. Absolutely loved it. Fun fact, that guide I made, this was on the PoE forums, kicked in like 24 million views over the time it was up. Yeah, and it is before I moved away from the PoE forums, that was my most popular build guide I ever made, and it's not minions.
Ironically, right?
Ironically, yeah.
As you said, Essence Drain Contagion.
Yeah, but I mean, it was up for a long time. Like we're talking a couple of years, but during that time, it accumulated just over 23, 24 million views or something. It was crazy.
Is any guide more successful than that? At least
I'm sure there are plenty. I mean, I have minion builds that these days are way above that now, but it took a long time before something beat that. But so there was a site called PoE Vault that's owned by Icy Veins. So they were having some poor writers on their site. So I get reached out by their community manager. They sold to Enthusiast Gaming. So these guys in like the leadership of Icy Veins is no longer there. That's completely new now. Yeah. $55 million or something crazy that Enthusiast Gaming bought them for is insane.
That is insane.
So they reached out and said, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, I already have a ton of build guys on the PoE forums. If I then move them over to PoE Vault and help them clean up the mess they had, this is many years ago. And I helped clean that up. And now there's a lot more people in there and the site's actually really good nowadays. The idea was I could actually get some ad revenue from my guys. And I was like, that sounds like I'm already doing this. I might as well get paid for it.
Of course.
So I transitioned all my guys over to that site many years ago. And then that evolved into me making guides for Last Epoch on their Icy Vein site. Same thing with Diablo 4 since Diablo 4 launched. And then PoE 2. So like all of those sites I have guides for. And I have so many guys these days that I have staff hired in my company to help me write and manage them because I can't do it myself anymore.
That's incredible.
It's been a kind of a journey, quite the journey.
What a like unbelievable success story, honestly. I when I think about all of the different things that were discussed way back in the day with Path of Exile from the very beginning and even before the company existed and so on, the idea that there would be people that would be able to have a viable career creating guide content for the game that we were working on was beyond a pipe dream. I mean, it barely even existed in Diablo 2, if you think about it. But of course, Diablo 2 didn't really have the complexity. Another thing, too, was that in Diablo, there was a handful of unique items in that game. I guess the rune words kind of took this role, but there weren't enough tools to actually create a guide around it. One of the greatest things about Path of Exile, in my experience with it, is that it's so much akin to building in Magic the Gathering. Every 3 months, a new set comes out. The set contains not a bunch of new cards, but it contains a bunch of new skill gems and skills to explore, as well as massive tuning to the game. And now you can go and innovate and kind of create a brand new Magic deck using these new tools. And now a totally formerly unviable strategy, like, for example, in Magic, maybe there's no Storm deck. And then all of a sudden they create a whole bunch of cantrips and a couple new Storm cards. And now Storm is suddenly this amazing archetype that exists. So there's this constant opportunity, and the fact that the items themselves, due to the auction house and due to the, originally third-party auction house and now integrated one, but there's so much more item flow as well. Now, if you're following a build guide, it says, get this unique item at level 23. Well, there's no friction there anymore. You can go get it for a alteration orb or something. It's like almost nothing in the way. And then as you get further up the chain, and because the guides are so well written and understood, I'm sure when you do this, you say, well, here's the best item that you want for your character at level 68 or whatever. But here are 3 other ones that aren't quite as good that'll also fulfill that role, and they don't cost tons of divine orbs. You might be able to get this amazing item. It does 90% of the work for only a chaos orb. And so the fact that there is all of this structure around the actual items that enable the builds, it just allows the process of guide writing to be so much more accurate, so much more specific to an individual's play style as well. Because you're not being told, oh, the only way this build works is if you have items that are worth 30 divine orbs each, that there actually is a version of the game and you can have tons of fun with a much more kind of abbreviated tool set. So
I think a lot of it comes down to I want to use the word extreme, but like the extreme complexity of the game. Like I've been one of those lucky few that still plays the game since a decade ago. It's like I got to experience us getting crafting tools. Like we had Eternal Orbs, sure, but we had like Exalted Orbs, Divine Orbs, we had Alterations, Transpeed Augments, Regals. Like that was kind of it. Like crafting was nothing. And then we got, essences. Everyone's freaking out. Oh my God. Then we had the Forsaken Masters patch. I don't know what you guys were thinking with having daily quests in there, but there's like that was such a cool thing with the crafting with that and all of that, what that meant. And then fossils came in and all those crafting. So I got to experience like 3 months of here's the new crafting method. I learned everything about that. And then when the next patch came in that had something new to add to the crafting power, the power available to players, I had already learned everything that existed. I just had to add the next thing. So when you get a new player coming in a decade later, having to learn all of these mechanics all at once, it's extremely overwhelming.
Totally.
So I definitely see like guides in general is helping bridge the gap, the knowledge gap when people don't want to sit and read through 2 Bibles to learn how to craft one item. Like I understand that concept because, no matter how much we praise the complexity, because I think that's part of the charm for PoE, we have to remember that the vast majority of the player base are casual players. Right. And, there's a difference between casual PvP players and casual Diablo players. I'll tell you that much. But ultimately, they all want the same thing. They come home from work, they pop a few brewskis, get into their gaming chair, and they want to play for like 2 hours. And then they have to go to bed because they got work in the morning.
Right.
And I guess a lot of people like myself being streamers and, people that might be unemployed or retired or whatever reason that plays an obnoxiously unhealthy amount of hours, it's very hard for us to put ourselves in those shoes and understand that concept. Because we would just say, just learn how to craft and, but it's very different, right? So I think that because of the complexity of PoE, guides help those players tremendously. But I mean, I've write guides at D4 and D4, you don't really need guides to play the game at a high level. Like most of it is kind of obvious. And people still use guides, and there's millions of people using guides. I mean, I see the numbers my guides are pumping in over the launch weekend for the latest expansion. It was millions in plural over just the first week.
Incredible.
It's insane.
It's incredible. On the subject of the guides, you mentioned Last Epoch, actually. I'm very curious. I don't know anything about the game. I've been kind of reading about it over the last couple of years. Whenever a new ARPG is on the horizon, I usually shoot a text message to Chris and I say, hey, Chris, I just heard about Last Epoch. What do you think, man? And he'll write me back 3 or 4 paragraphs. That usually gives me a pretty good TLDR. And then I kind of decide whether or not I want to go further. And up to the present, I haven't really felt compelled to go explore any of these other ARPGs. Are you enjoying Last Epoch? Is it, do you think it's worthy of the time and the guide writing and the commitments? Or are you doing it, I guess, I wouldn't say exclusively, but mainly to kind of fill that niche in the community? Obviously, there are people playing the game and they want Ghazzy summoner guides.
I mean, there are plenty of fantastic guide creators. When I first started out, there was no one else covering minions to the extent that I am and did. Like, no one. nowadays there are people out there that make fantastic guides, including minion builds. Like I'm not the only minion guide creator. There are plenty of really good guide creators out there that do fantastic work. I praise them every time I see it. It's fantastic.
I believe it. Yeah, of course.
So when it comes to like Last Epoch, the problem with that is that I have my guides are hosted on Icy Veins, and the general traffic generated on Last Epoch just wasn't worth the money invested into maintaining it. So we are no longer, I'm no longer managing any Last Epoch guides. When it comes to the game itself, I think the game is fun because the way I see the ARPG games is if I get at least a week's worth of enjoyment from the game, then I consider the game to be good. And it took Diablo 4 3 years and have to pay for the game 3 times before they reached that point. This expansion was the first time I enjoyed it for more than a week. It's crazy. Yep. Last Epoch, I've been enjoying for about a week every release they've had. Torchlight, same thing. And as long as I get that, I consider it to be a good game. So yeah, I think Last Epoch is great. I think Last Epoch filled a necessity in the industry when the ARPG scene, because you had on one side you have PoE, super complex, very advanced. Your veterans love it. And then on the opposite side, you have the opposite player base. You got your D4 casual enjoyers, the super easy, your 9-to-5 guy who works, he comes home, he cooks food for his family, his wife, and he's about to pop a few brews. He's getting on the couch to play Diablo 4. Now the doorbell rings. Oh, it's his wife's boyfriend. They go play Tetris or something in the bedroom and makes weird noises, and he plays Diablo 4 in the couch. That's the target audience.
This is an elaborate scenario. There's like adultery involved and stuff.
I didn't say that. They're playing Tetris. And in the middle is where Last Epoch put themselves, right? They have enough complexity to be interesting, but it's not too advanced to be scaring for the D4 player. So they put themselves right in the middle, and that's kind of like their sales pitch. And they did so excellently. And from the launch of Last Epoch and everything they've gone through, there's been other games on the horizon. We have Titan Quest 2 coming around the corner. We have Grim Dawn's expansion around the corner. Wow. We have Torchlight stepping up their game, even though they still have some pay-to-win issues and whatnot. Well, some they still have pay-to-win issues, period. So there's a lot of these things in the background. And then PoE 2 is also coming in here. And PoE 2 is not as extreme if you have this graph again. They're more like somewhere between Last Epoch and PoE 1. But it's also the new bright shiny toy that people want to play with. It's modern and everything. And it also has a tremendous higher amount of ROI from marketing and whatnot as well. But Last Epoch is a good game for sure. But they do find themselves right in the middle of the spectrum between D4 and PoE 1.
It's such an amazing thing to me as I would say lifelong game developer, that this sort of symbiotic relationship has arisen between guide writers and the content creators. And when I say content creators, I'm talking about the game developers themselves. That clearly these two systems really support each other, that guide writers are, as you said, integral to the play experience of potentially millions of people who want to engage with the game with a high level of expertise and understanding, but they don't have the time because of job and life obligations and so on to actually gain that super high level of mastery. And the fact that people like you create these amazing guides that hold, it's not even so much hand-holding. You still have to do the work, but they tell you every step of the way how to get from level 1 all the way up to beating the end game content. And you can kind of dig as deep as you want, but you can totally still feel like you're playing the game at a high level, that it's not a dumbed down experience. You still have to figure out how to get the items, and you still have to problem solve. It's just this massive point of friction, which is a necessary consequence of the fact that a game like Path of Exile is so complicated. And PoE, by any metric, I mean, you only need to look at the skill tree in the game, which is just scratching the surface of the infinite permutations that exist about how you can create a game when you account for all of the countless mechanics that have come in over the last 13 years. All of the unique items, all of the skills, all of the adjustments, all of the adjustments to those adjustments, and so on. It's this impenetrable layer of complexity that is totally inaccessible to probably 95% of casuals without the guide system. And then the guide system also supports an entire ecosystem of people like you who can literally turn it into a career. You have... And you get all of the things that come along with the career, including, you're going to go to ExileCon in a couple of months. Yeah. We'll overlap there and you'll be famous there. Being able to be famous for anything is amazing. And being able to be famous for writing guides in a game that gives you so much enjoyment, that clearly is the source of so much passion. What could be better, right?
No. I do think that things like FOMO plays a huge role, because I do think that very casual players, they use guides mostly because of FOMO. They don't want to have their time wasted. They want to go in and they want to play. They want to sit there after a week, 2 weeks of playing, when they finally reach endgame, that a veteran player does in one sitting. They do that after a week or two. They get there and realize, oh, my bill's shit, and I can't play the game properly. So a lot of FOMO comes into play with those things. It's avoiding people wasting their time, and people want to play the best of the best. I mean, we see this whether it's my guides or someone else's guide. It doesn't really matter. Like, people playing something they know and can guarantee is going to be good. And if they run into problems, they have the creator of that guide to ask questions. But hey, I struggled with this. But it's guides normally, the target audience of them is people that need it. And then there's obviously people that don't really need it, but will utilize it because of FOMO. But it's also very clear with how bad people are at reading. Like, I understand that, like, some of these people, you couldn't help them no matter how much money I was paid. Like, some people are not helpable. Like, you can't help them. It's insane.
I'm aware for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, you get exposed to that part of the player base as well. It's like they're asking questions like, "Did you even read the guide?" The answer's in here. You send a screenshot of the guide part where it's covered. Like, here it is. That's the answer. And they're like, "Oh, thanks, man." I'm like, "Yeah, but if you read the guide, you wouldn't ask." Like, there's a lot of those things, but. I mean, I definitely think that FOMO plays a huge role in guide writing in general. I personally think that FOMO ruins gaming, and I know that me as a streamer, I'm part of the problem that makes FOMO even worse. I'm complaining about myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, you and your ilk make it look easy, and it's one of those things where you spend that many. At this point, probably you put in 10,000 hours on, if not PoE, but at least the genre. When 10,000 hours at anything, it gives you this unbelievable stratospheric level of mastery at it. And so you have this innate understanding of all the balance and how everything works. And to an outside person, it seems like magic. So they need to read your guides to get at least a little bit of that magic. Do you get tons and tons of email inquiries and messages and stuff every day about the guides and Ghazzy, oh my God, help me? Or is it pretty... Do they have other places where they can find that out? Do they have a community that they can bounce questions off of?
So normally I get a lot on the stream. I think most of us guide creators get on stream, but Icyveins is I believe, still to this day, is the only guide writing site for the genre of ARPG games that has a dedicated Discord server in which people can ask questions for any guides on their site for any ARPG game. So they have the Icyveins staff helping answering questions 24/7 every day of the year. And I have myself and I have my staff doing that as well. So every time someone has questions with the guides, they can go to that server and get help within 24 hours. And Icyveins, I believe to this day, is the only site in the RPG scene that does this. Wow, so most of it goes through that. But otherwise it pops up in the stream. You mentioned 10,000 hours. That's cute.
Oh, are we talking 20?
In PoE, now I'm north of 30,000.
No way.
I had to send an email to Grinding Gear Games to verify the exact amount of hours because I had a standalone client.
I would say how much of that time was spent idling, but you play summoners,
a lot.
right? So,
lot. So back in the day before we had a synchronous trade, and I was doing mirror service items, which required tremendous amount of currency. We had this team set up. So we would basically make sure our items were up for sale 24/7. So if I had the items, when I went to bed, I had to ship my items off to a friend who would stay up till like woke up. Oh, and so like, if I did something else, I record a video, or if I'm playing something else, I would still be logged in to be available for trades every day, no matter what I was doing. So I would always have that up on my monitor. If I was in the house watching a movie, I would have my laptop logged in just to deal with trades. So like, there's a lot of idling time, but yes, it's a lot of hours.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that. A long time ago, I remember, if you remember back in 2019, there was a mobile version of Path of Exile that was announced. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't really know if the game's playable on mobile. It's just like, it's a WASD game. It's got a million hotkeys and a million things going on and all these UI elements and stuff you need to track. Does it really translate to a phone? It was shocking to me that nobody had built a trade app on a phone, because exactly if you think about your own experience, having it on your phone where you get alerts and it can coordinate some of the stuff. It wouldn't necessarily be able to execute the trade, at least not until you have the modern capability. But just being alerted to trades and stuff would be so incredibly helpful and would be a really, really good use of integrating a phone with the game itself. But it didn't really ever come to pass. I had another kind of almost closing question I wanted to ask you, because whenever I run into somebody that is as brilliant as you are, is as accomplished and well-spoken and just well thought out, nuanced and introspective, and you understand this in your DNA, 30,000 hours of experience. Have you thought about designing your own game? Have you thought about making a game maybe built around the Summoner experience? Is that something you've thought about at all? Because I think you would have a very unique voice and a very unique perspective that I think a lot of people would really enjoy.
I would have loved to do that. I would have loved to be part of the creation of a game. I don't have enough coding skills to participate more outside of, my experiences kind of thing, and game mechanics and those aspects of it as a verbal person, not so much when it comes to the coding part. And for me to go through the process of learning to do those would take too much time off the choice of profession that is currently occupying 6.5 days a week for me. And that half day is the time I dedicate entirely to my family. Let's put it this way. This weekend was the first time I had 3 days off in a row since 8th of July, 2022. That's why I have it inside the ring.
4 years. Wow.
So, we have travels. Well, we travel, and I guess, that's kind of worktation, I guess, but not counting that. I'm off 1 or 2 days a week. 2 days is very rare, and 3 days was 4 years ago. So me taking time off to learn coding and whatnot, that's not happening. That's just not going to happen.
I'd like to tell you a secret. I can't code at all. I took a couple of coding I screwed around when I was a little kid. I learned a programming language called Pascal when I was a little kid. My dad had a whole booklet about it. I tried to program my own adventure game, and I worked on it for a couple of weeks, and then I gave up because I was way too lazy and it was way too hard. And I just interacted with games as a player. I took one coding class at UC Santa Cruz back in the early 90s and came to the same conclusion. This isn't for me. But honestly, you have a brilliant mind, and you could contribute to a game development project in a ton of ways that have nothing to do with coding. Because fundamentally, I almost feel like coding is fungible. Many people can code, but very, very few people can create great art. And I think you have the potential to work as a great artist, as a designer. You understand the artistry of all of this. It's proven unequivocally in the fact you have millions of people paying attention to the stuff that you produce. That's real artistry. So don't sell yourself short, honestly. Consider it if you find the time.
I have worked as a consultant for a couple of companies, when it comes to game mechanics and specifically minions. There's been a bit of that kind of work on the side. But no, I would have loved to be part of a game development from start to finish. I know you're working on a game. I know Chris Wilson's working on something. I don't know any direct detail. I'm sure you know way more than I do.
Honestly, I don't.
He's keeping his lips sealed?
He doesn't tell me anything at all. I asked to help. I'm like, hey, Chris. Hey, Chris, I've got some ideas. What's your game about? I've got lots of cool ideas. He goes, we're good, Brian. We're good.
Okay.
I think Chris really wants to kind of go at his own. He has brought on board trusted people that he's worked with in the past and so on. But this is a Chris Wilson project. I have the utmost confidence in him and in his team, but I know nothing about it at all.
Okay.
Next to nothing.
But it's I talked to him about stuff like that. And I told Chris as well, because I think, since I know that it's going to be something ARPG related, the hiring page he had was something about having, deep understanding of roots of Diablo 2. And I was like, okay, this sounds like right up my alley. Chris, bro, you're going to post it in minion stuff. You're going to poke, right? You got my DMs open. So I would have loved to be a part of something like that from the ground up. I would have loved to be part of something like that. That would be fun to do, especially when it comes to minions. I guess it's one of those, if you can't do, you teach kind of moments, when we're getting too old, I guess, because we've been at it for so many years. I would have loved to be on that side of the fence. That would have been really cool to see how that is and, utilize the experiences that I have for that kind of projects. That would be fun. The problem is time, right? So it has to be like, it has to be structured in a way that's manageable. It's like, sure, I stream 6 days a week, and then on launches, I stream 7 days a week for at least a couple of weeks before I go back to 6 days a week. And I'm supposed to be a family man at the same time. So I got to balance that work-life balance the best I can. But so adding more to it is tough.
I hope you do get a chance to flex your creative chops in that way. I think you'd be very successful at it. It has been wild just learning all about this. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk today. It was long overdue. I've been really wanting to do it since we chatted last time on Tavern Talk. And it took a year, but better late than never. And I get to see you in a couple of months and hang out some more in New Zealand. I'm really looking forward to that.
Same.
Thank you for being such an asset to the community. I know that there are millions of people who feel this way, and they would not be able to experience the games that they enjoy, and they would not be able to have the experience that they specifically want without all of your hard work and your time in the space. From the bottom of my heart, as someone that just has watched the surreal experience of Path of Exile's success over the years, thank you for being a huge part of that community and for really making what it is today, Ghazzy. I'm beyond grateful.
It goes both ways. I told Chris, I told Jonathan the same thing. I told you last time we met in, long time ago, but last time we met, the same thing. Like for me, like my entire career and most of my adult life has been spent in Path of Exile. Like I've told you guys the same thing as I'm going to say now. It's like you guys are kind of the game, and you guys have shaped who I am. Like with all the over a decade of spending time in the marvel of what you guys created. So it's like it definitely goes both ways.
It's been an honor, seriously, and I look forward to chatting with you another time.
Same.
All right, thanks for joining me today. All right, I'll catch you later. I would love your feedback on this series. If you're enjoying the videos, please give me a thumbs up. If there's games you think I might have missed, please recommend them, and I will get to them. See you for the next one.